Welcome to Shoulda Known. I'm Venemous, and with me as always is my hetero life mate,
Titan.
On today's episode, we're going to be discussing relationships.
Yeah, so we're going to talk about our experiences because both Venomous and myself have been in a long-term relationship. Venomous is still in an extremely long-term relationship. And we figured that we have some input and some experiences that might be beneficial to everyone else who's listening.
We'd love to interact with you, so please like, subscribe, and leave a comment. So let's start talking about the past. Let's start at the very beginning. So Titan, I know you just went through a recent divorce, but you were married for a long time, had that relationship for a long time. Let's start let's start when you started. How did you and your ex meet?
So you want to know when we started? I just want to make
Yeah.
sure because you said started a lot. So I just wanted to see if that's where you wanted
I
to
did.
start.
Let me start that again. Let me start that.
No. I like it. I like it. I want to leave it in.
repetitive.
I want to leave that in because I think it's fun. I think it makes it fun. But if you want to start it again, you can.
Man, I'm feeling bullied now.
Yeah.
Maybe this is the bullying episode.
Yeah, sounds good. Let's go. Okay, so from the start. So
From the beginning. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's see. I'll tell you how I met her. So she and I met through a mutual friend, and he basically was like, "Hey, I need somebody to kind of keep this girl company because my girlfriend's coming to visit. She's bringing this friend, and I'd like to be able to spend some time with my girlfriend, And he's like,
yeah, so you were basically a wingman.
Yeah, I was a wingman / pity date. We always kind of joked and said she was a pity date. She was in on that joke. And yeah, so I, showed up, had a couple friends with me just in case things went poorly. This is people were just getting cell phones, so we hadn't learned how to do the emergency phone call thing yet to get out of bad situations.
Mm-hmm.
But so, anyways, show up. First friend dipped before we even got a chance to go anywhere because he's like, you'll be fine. We all went to dinner. Dinner went really well. After dinner, the other friend
That's a heck
dipped.
of a friend.
Yeah. Well, he wasn't really a great friend, to be honest. He's kind of a jerk. But that could be a whole other discussion on jerks. But anyways, so the other friend, I told him after dinner, I was like, I'm cool now if you want to kind of get off. I really appreciate it. We go back to the hotel, and we're kind of just, talking and having drinks or whatever. And I'm really bad at picking up on signals. Always kind of have been on whether or not somebody likes me. And so it wasn't until it's time to go kind of a thing where she's like, listen, I'm going to go to bed. If you want to stay, you aren't sleeping in all those clothes. Because I was wearing a turtleneck sweater and, jeans and stuff. I was looking good. But, and I was like, oh, okay.
So hot.
Yeah. And so I'm like, oh, okay, that must be the signal she likes me. So, I stay. And we had a good night. And so then the next night we ended up going back. Everybody stayed at my place because I had an apartment. So we ended up staying at my place the next night just to save money, whatever. Anyways, and then that kind of started the relationship. The next weekend, she lived in a different state. I drove about 6 hours to go visit her. And on the way down, she's like, oh, hey, by the way, I'm making dinner. I'm like, okay, cool. No problem. She's like, oh, yeah. And my parents are going to be there. I'm like, okay. She's like, oh, and my brother or sister and brother-in-law. Yeah. And my two best friends and their two kids. And I'm like, oh, this is going to be fun.
Wow.
It went really well. Obviously.
I'd be like, isn't this too soon?
Yeah.
Red flag.
Well, yeah, it's a whole thing. I think her mom was just worried that I might be some kind of serial killer or something. Because,
you do look like one.
Because I am a Caucasian male. Sure. Okay. Because that's what most of them
that's
are.
most of them there.
Almost all of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Okay. But never been formally charged, so I'm still good. Anyways, yeah, so that was kind of the start of the relationship. And then for several months, almost a year actually, we traveled back and forth, seeing each other, every, week if we could, every 2 weeks, whatever, because I was in the military at the time. And so we ended up getting married about a year later, and we were married for 19 plus years. It was almost 20 years when we ended up.
That's pretty good.
Divorce was finalized.
Pretty good run.
Yeah, it was a good run.
So what was it that compelled you to make that 6-hour drive and then find out that you're gonna basically meet the entire family?
Well, I
Like,
didn't meet the.
what was going through your head at that point?
Yeah, I didn't know about meeting the family till
Other
I
than the
was
obvious.
halfway. Yeah, yeah, well, yeah. I didn't know about the family till I was about halfway through the drive. As far as the
Oof.
compelling thing was that just had a really good time, conversation and talking and stuff, and intellectually and stuff. We seemed like we were on the same
Yeah.
level, or
Sure.
close.
Sure. Sure.
Um, and I
Always a
don't
good
know,
thing.
just yeah, it's a good thing. The way we looked at a lot of things kind of gelled as far as interests and likes, and movies and TVs and stuff like that. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, yeah, that was kind of how I think you kind of start with any relationship. It's like, what do we have in common? What do we don't? And kind of go from there. And everything seemed great. So I was like, okay, I'll make that drive. So
Awesome.
yeah, that was.
And so tell me about the dinner. So how'd that go?
Dinner went really well. No issues with that. The thing that was funny is that her mom was like, "I can't believe you're gonna." She had her own place, but it was right next door to her mom's, and she's like, "I can't believe you're gonna let him stay here. You just met him, and blah blah blah." Um, she was 27 at the time, so it wasn't like she
Mm-hmm.
was
Yeah.
20. I was actually only 21. We actually had 6 years difference. But yeah, she was 27, and her mom's like, "I can't believe you're doing this." Anyways, so it was funny because after dinner, which went well, the next day, she and
I mean,
I,
she's the cradle robber, not you.
right, exactly. The next day, she and I actually were going around looking at apartments because she was trying to, like, well, maybe I need to move out of, that place. It was a family home. Um, and
Wait,
it
wait, wait. So
was,
this is what, day 3?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, not move in together. She was still going to live where she is, just in, by
Oh,
herself. Yeah, 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 yeah.
okay, okay.
No, yeah. So no,
I mean, because you
yes.
went from day 1 to meeting, day 2 to basically being introduced to the entire family, and then day 3 looking for apartments.
There was another day in there because when we came back to my apartment, that was
Oh,
technically day. So
oh,
it's
okay,
day
that's
4.
better. That's better.
Yeah, yeah, a tad bit better. But no,
Yeah,
it was just looking for her because she
we
was
all
just,
do that.
yeah, she was just mad at her mom and was looking at, like, well, maybe I
Yeah,
just need
sure,
to find my own place, get out from
absolutely.
under my parents. Yeah,
And she was confiding in you, right? Like,
exactly.
you're the new thing in her life, and of
Yeah,
course she wants to share and confide in you and stuff like that. So
right.
understandable.
Yeah, but yeah, so that's how kind of everything went. And like I said, that she didn't move out. She ended up her mom and her worked it out because her mom liked me so
Hmm.
much, and actually always did. Like, her parents were always super great, even after the divorce. Like, her parents like still
Still is
talk
good.
occasionally and
That's a
stuff.
good.
Yeah.
That's a good thing to have.
So because, like, when I told them we were getting divorced, they were like, "Listen, you're still our son. We've known you for 20 years now, so you're still always going to be our son." And I
Yeah,
was like, "Oh, made me cry a little bit." To be honest.
very sweet. Very
Yeah,
sweet.
it was.
Yeah,
So
good relationship to have.
yeah. Um,
So,
so
so, so eventually your relationship got a little bit more complicated, right? You were traveling a lot, and she started kind of having some health issues. Can you talk a little bit about um some of the challenges that you guys had while you were essentially away from the house, like for months at a time? And then
um,
you can kind of get into the health issues if you want.
yeah. So I mean, the most of the marriage things seemed pretty good, especially early on. After about a year of being married, I had to deploy for 7 months. And leading up to that time, I had to go out to sea for a couple of weeks, come back, be gone for a week, come home for a week. We did that for a little
Yeah.
while, and then finally I was deployed for 7 months, and things seemed okay.
Which is a
I
long time, for like
Yeah,
newlyweds.
yeah, yeah.
And not
It's
just newlyweds, but a couple who still had a very young relationship.
Yeah, I mean, by this point we've been together 2 years, but again, she was older, so from a maturity level, that seemed okay. She actually had a really hard time with me being gone. She was so used to me being there to do things that
Yeah.
it really kind of messed with her. And I didn't find out. And my sister actually told me when I came back from being out to sea, because I was really frustrated one day. She's like, "Well, you're lucky she didn't show up to the pier with divorce papers." And I thought it was kind of a, like, "Oh, she just had a really hard time." Um,
Ha ha ha. Yep.
right. But actually, I found out after I told her I wanted a divorce and stuff. She actually told me, she's like, "Yeah, actually, I was going to have you served on the pier." She already had a lawyer, all this stuff. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I was going to come back thinking everything was okay, you know, to
Hmm.
find out I'm being like, what? Like, that's awful, you know? So anyways, that actually made me angry when I
Yeah,
found
you
out
were
about that.
completely kind of caught off guard, of course. I mean, that makes a total
Right.
sense.
Yeah.
And when you go away like that for 7 months,
Yeah.
in your mind, does life? I'm trying to figure out a way to say this without sounding like an asshole, but like, does life back home seem to be at a standstill for you,
Yeah.
or
It's
yeah,
funny.
okay,
We had an argument one night. Well, more of her side than mine, because she and I did not, mostly her. She didn't really get along for several weeks, until it
hmm,
was, I don't know. I was home. I don't know, about 3 weeks. I was helping her at a convention she was setting up for her work, and we were at dinner later that night, and she's like, "Thank you for helping me set this up." I was like, "Oh, no problem." She's like, "What was it? I've really missed you." And that was the first time she told me she missed me since I'd been home. And like I said, I've been home
wow,
like 3 weeks. Um, and she's like, I'm sorry I've been such a bitch about it. And I was like, oh, no, that's okay. And I was like, you just had to work through whatever you get through. But it was interesting because before that,
right, right,
I took her out. We went to a really nice dinner at some place. Everything was going really great at dinner. We get home and we lived in a townhouse. And when we go upstairs, we always turn on the light to go upstairs. So I flick on the light. And she's like, do you need the light to go upstairs? And I was just like, I
whoa,
guess not, and
so
turned it
aggressive.
off. Yeah. And so when we went upstairs, I was like, listen, you got to understand, for the last 7 months, every day is the same day. It's Groundhog Day. It's the same day. Yeah, your shift of what time you work changes, but in the end, it's the same thing. Whereas life for her continued for 7 months. And
Right, yeah.
so, and yeah. So anyway, so that we had that discussion, and like I said, things got better. And then going into the medical stuff, which we touched on with the chronic
Real
pain
quick, let
episode.
me
Yeah,
before you go into the medical stuff, I just thought of a question to ask you. So did she? I know the military provides support for spouses.
sure.
Did she take advantage of that at all? Does she intend to reach out or anything, or was it just one of those things where she was just dealing with it by herself and it just became really hard?
So she ended up finding a couple friends that I think really helped her out. One of the guys I worked
Oh,
with,
good.
she ended up kind of meeting up with to just share, hey, this is what I'm going through. And so she has a master's degree, right? And this person she became friends with also had an advanced degree, I think, in chemical engineering, actually. They tried to go to some of the spouses, where the women would get together and talk or whatever, but
Sure. Yep.
they
Yep.
found that they had a hard time because the I don't want to belittle anyone, but there was definitely a difference when it comes to career goals. And so they didn't really feel like they had anything in common with them because most of them already had kids and they were more focused on that. Whereas both my ex and her friend were both more focused on like careers and stuff like that.
On their careers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Yeah, that
so
makes
they
sense.
didn't
Okay.
really utilize that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah. So
But hey, at least they tried it, right?
yeah.
Like, it's one thing to know that the assistance is out there and then you do nothing with it,
Right.
to knowing that there's assistance and taking advantage of it. Two different
Well,
worlds, in my opinion. So that's
and I
great.
think
I do commend her for trying it out.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that she could have probably done, which she didn't, is from a therapy standpoint. Probably seeing an actual
Hmm.
therapist probably
Yep.
would have helped with some of that. Those kinds of services she didn't
Right. Right. Yeah.
utilize. So, but yeah, and
Yeah.
then that's how things kind of went. And like I said, once I got back after about 3 weeks or so, it got better and everything was fine. Everybody was happy.
Yeah.
Um, and then it was like later on we had our son. And around a little bit before our son was born is when she started to get into the migraines, started becoming an issue. And then during the pregnancy, and then after the pregnancy. And when I got out because of her migraines. When I got out, we moved next door at the
Hmm.
same old house next to her parents. Lived there for a couple of years until I ended up getting into the IT kind of job that I do now. And I started traveling all the time. And when I was traveling then, her parents could help out and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
It was,
which is
everything
nice.
was,
That's awesome.
yeah, it was nice.
Yeah.
But she definitely, I don't know if it was medication she was on. But I mean, honestly, most of her family was extremely concerned for her. Um, I will say that she did have some undiagnosed things from like a mental health perspective that later got diagnosed. Once those were diagnosed
Got
and
it.
treated, it was better. But then, we ended up moving. Well, after we moved, I stopped traveling as much. Kind of things were tough for a while financially, especially. And I remember at one point, I told her, I sat her down. I said, "Listen, I'm miserable. Like I am so unhappy because I'm working all day. I come home and I would do all the stuff around the house." She wasn't working anymore.
Okay.
She had stopped working and hadn't been for a while, which then made things from a financial aspect harder because then everything was on me.
Yep.
But then again, to
Yep.
come
You had
home
all
and
that pressure on you.
yeah, and so she kind of stepped up for a little bit, and now looking back on it, it's like, oh well, you know, it was better. But then when I really think about it, it's like, no, it was only better for about 3 or 4 months. And then she kind of reverted back to the same thing. Because I remember we later moved into an apartment to help save on some costs. And I'm sitting there I cooked dinner and I'm doing the dishes. And she's sitting on the couch watching TV. And I look at her and I'm like, why in the hell am I doing dishes? I worked all day. I worked 10 hours a
Yeah.
day.
Yeah.
Plus, I came home and cooked. Now I'm doing the dishes. At no point did she help with any of that. So why am I doing it? And I told her that. I'm like, why am I doing the dishes? Um, and so she's like, no, you're right, whatever. And again, things kind of got better for a little bit. But honestly, the big thing is I started traveling again. And with traveling, I was gone Monday through Thursday. And so Monday through Thursday, I kind of got a
Yeah.
break from all that responsibility. And I didn't I didn't realize that basically every time I was home for an extended period of time, 6 months, a year, whatever, I'd get into that I'm kind of miserable thing because every time I would get to feeling that way, I would start traveling again. And so that kind of went
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
until,
Your feelings were being masked by travel,
right.
by
And
you
then,
not being there and not having to deal with it for an
exactly.
extended period of time.
Yep.
Yeah.
Basically. And then it was, I guess, 2019 or so, I basically stopped traveling almost completely. And so I was home all the time. And then the pandemic hit and I was home even more because I was working from home more
Yeah.
often. And it built up and built up. And then finally, I remember I'm just like, one day I'm like, this is awful. Like, I don't want to live the next 20 years like this because over the last decade, even though we started finding some things for her health to improve it, so that her migraines were less frequent, and we got control of some of her mental health issues, she still didn't do anything, and in fact, even did less around the house. Like she would at least do laundry and things like that. She got to the point where she didn't even do that anymore.
Sure.
And I remember
Yeah.
she and I would fight all the time because she would try to get our son to do stuff, and he already had chores, as he should, but she would try to get him to do all these other things. I'm like, no, no, no. He already does more in this house than you do. Why are we going to ask him to do extra stuff that he's not getting? It's like that.
Yeah.
No, you do it.
That's not fair. Yeah.
I would ask her like, could you vacuum, the house today? Because it's been a while. And I would basically have to ask her for a month. And then sometimes I'd just end up doing it myself, or I'd come home and my son's doing it because she paid him to do it instead. Um, and so those were the kind of things that, like I said, one day I realized I just had the weight on my shoulders of everything because I started going to therapy and I had depression. And that's when I was just like, yeah, I don't want to live the next 20 years like this. And so I started looking into and then filed for divorce.
So how did your plan come together to get divorced?
What do you mean exactly? Like,
How'd you go about it? I'm
oh,
sure people are kind of curious about what the process is,
yeah.
so just
So,
figured you could talk a little bit about that.
yeah. And so the first thing is, I mean, we've been married so long. It's like, okay, what's it going to be from? So the first things I was curious about was child support, alimony, those kinds of things. What is it going to look like
Hmm.
financially? Also, I didn't want to screw her over completely. We've been together 20 years. I didn't dislike her. I didn't hate her, So I was like,
Right. Right.
what can I do? One, because I do
Yeah.
still care about
And
this
there was
person.
there was definitely love. There was definitely love
Yeah,
there for
I
sure.
love this person. I'm just, I hate to use the cliche thing. I'm not in love with this person anymore. And honestly, I don't think I'd been in love with him for a long time. My
Mhm.
lawyer ended up putting it best that basically you're just roommates, and not even good roommates because she doesn't even help around the house, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that was it. I mean, there was no intimacy. We hadn't been intimate in over a year. Um, so,
Yeah.
anyways, yes. But so what I started
Rough.
doing is I started searching, what's child support? What's all that stuff going to be? What's the process? Just Googled it for my state. And in my state, there technically is no spousal support if you're married less than 20 years. Um, However, there's special circumstances like if they're on disability, which she is.
She is.
Um, it's up to a judge. A judge can award up to a certain amount. There's a limit based on your
Oh,
income.
okay.
And so I said, you know what? I'm going to make this. So I went and talked to a lawyer. They kind of talked me through the process. You do a consultation fee. And
Always lawyer up, kids.
yeah,
Always
definitely get a
lawyer
lawyer.
up.
Well, if everything is completely amicable and you don't really have anything to split, yeah, you could probably just do it through a mediator and save money because it was like $5,000 to the lawyer for the retainer fee. I think I got $1,000 back because I did so much of the
Okay.
work for him. But I basically told him, I said, I'm going to offer her the amount that a judge could award her because I want this to be quick and over because I want to get on with my life. And if we go through the courts and drag it out fighting over stupid amounts of money, it's just going to waste my money anyways. So I said, I'm going to give her half of all the assets, which she would get, period, because that's how that works. But as far as
Sure.
spousal
Yep.
support, I said, I want to give her the max, which was 20%. I think it was 20%, or whatever the percentage was. And now in the state that I'm in, the max amount of time is 7 years. So I said, I'll do it for 7 years. And what was it? I remember, so he's like, I went to the lawyer. He's like, okay, well, we'll file the paperwork. Don't tell her yet until we get some things in place for your own protection, stuff to keep her from just going and spending,
Mm.
buying a Porsche or something. I was like, okay.
Right. Right. Right.
Um,
Right. Yeah. Makes sense.
that's where it got painful for me because for a month, I knew I was getting divorced. She didn't know it. Right. So
Yeah.
I
That's
couldn't
weird.
tell her. That was difficult. We were talking about taking family photos and stuff like before that. And I'm having to tell my son's like, when are we going to do family photos? Because he wanted to dye his hair afterwards. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I
Hmm.
scheduled it. It's in 3 weeks. We kept going on and on. So then finally, I get all the paperwork that I can tell her about it. And so then my therapist said I should talk to my son first. So the day I'm going to tell her, she was out at a doctor's appointment so that I could load stuff in the car so that I could go stay at a hotel for however long. And I was like, talk to my son about it. And so when I tell him, he was actually like, well, actually, I expect you to tell me this like 3 or 4 years ago, which means I waited definitely 3 or 4 years
Jeez.
too long, right? Um,
Oof.
but then he's like, so I guess we're not doing family photos, are we? And I'm like, oh yeah, I never scheduled that shit. So, um, but
Yeah. Not happening, kid.
yeah, I mean, we could, it'd just be kind of awkward, but
Yeah.
she didn't take it great.
Just the two of you.
Yeah, she didn't take her. And honestly, when she came back, I just sat her down. I was like, "We need to talk." And I said, and I was just point blank with it because I don't think there's any good way to do that. So I was like, "Listen, I filed for divorce. I've been unhappy for a really long time. I've tried to fix it. I've read books on relationships. I've gone to therapy myself. I took us to therapy. I tried to get you to read those books, but you never would. I got you the books
Yep.
on
You
tape. You
did.
wouldn't listen to them. All these things that I tried to do for the last 5 years, actually. I'd started doing all that stuff 5 years ago. And so I was like, I can't do this anymore. And I'm sorry, but I just can't. And she was not very happy with it, of course, and because it mostly just took her by surprise. We've been together so long, she just
Yeah.
expected us to be together forever, which I understand that, and I do, feel bad. And it's actually impacts my current relationship. So I'm in a long-term committed relationship with my girlfriend, and I know that there's a part of her because we talked about it. She's like, "But how do I know you're not going to up and decide to leave me? 20 years down the road?" And I'm like, "Well, one, I didn't just up and decide. For 5 years I tried to fix it." And it's funny because my ex-wife, every so often as we're going through the process, she'd be like, well, why didn't you say anything? And I'm like, I did. I mean, I literally would tell her that I was unhappy. And there's times like when we were arguing over something and I'm like, how long do you expect me to live like this? I made it
Yeah.
clear, in my opinion. I don't know how much clearer I could make it. And even one time, I was like, I took us to couples counseling. And she's like, well, we did that for a couple of months. I'm like, no, we did it for a year and a half. So that was the problem. And even when we talked about the intimacy, I brought that up to her one time. She's like, it hasn't been that long. I'm like, oh, no, it has, because the last time we did was, this time. And so, anyways, yeah, that's
And it was
how.
a huge amount of time. It was
Yeah,
like
it
a
was a
year,
huge amount
right?
of time. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it was definitely, it was a year and I think 4 months, as I think how long it was. And
Yeah.
we over the last 10 years of our relationship, it started getting longer and longer in between. And I remember sometimes going, I wonder how long it'll be this time. And, it just, I don't know. It kept getting, it would be months at a time. And then all of a sudden, like I said, it was like a year and 4 months, year and a half, maybe. And it's like, yeah, I don't want
Yeah,
to live
that's
in a relationship like
kind of
that.
crazy.
And I get it if you're with
Yeah.
someone and
Yeah.
they can't for medical reasons, whatever.
Sure.
But as far as I know, there wasn't. And she would complain about some things with it, about her own self. And I'm like, well, go
Yep.
see a doctor. Like, oh, please go
Yep.
see
Go
a
see a
doctor.
doctor. Yep.
And she never would. So she just wouldn't. And that was
Yep.
part
And
of our arguments.
you
Is
were
she would,
very supportive about like whatever it was that she needed
yep.
to get that situation looked at or
Yeah.
whatever, or treated, whatever it is.
And that was
And she
true
just
for
really
all of her
didn't do
medical
anything
issues.
about it at all.
Yeah. And exactly. And I was to say that was true for all of her medical issues. Like she
Yeah.
had a lot of them. And I would be like, okay, this isn't right. You're sleeping 16 hours a day. You would sleep 12 hours, get up, be up for 30 minutes, start falling asleep again. I said, that's not right. I said, please go see a doctor. And
Yeah.
she never would. And it was like that with everything. Any of her doctors, she just wouldn't see them. The only one she would see is her psychiatrist. But I went to one of her appointments one time, and the doctor's like, well, how's everything going? She's like, oh, it's fine. And it's like, no, it's not. It is not fine. you know and I think that's what would
No, it's
happen
not
when she
fine.
did go. It was, how's everything going? Oh, it's fine.
Yeah.
And so they don't change anything. That's like,
Everything's
no.
great.
Yeah, everything is awesome.
Do you think that she actually believed that, or do
I
you think that she just didn't want to hear the feedback
I think that's
from the psychologist?
her mom does a similar thing. It's
Oh yeah.
I want everyone on the outside to think everything's fine, even if inwardly
Yeah. Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
not. That's what I think. I think it's
It's
just
not.
that how she was raised.
Yep.
Damn it, hit my friggin' mic.
Yep.
So yeah. Um,
Makes sense.
yeah. So, anyways, that's all that relationship. Like I said, now I'm in a long-term committed relationship with my girlfriend. And it's funny because my ex-wife is like, "Oh, you found her before, and she's the reason we got divorced." No. I found her after I was staying in the hotel because I was lonely sitting in a hotel room, and I'm like, "Oh, let me get on this dating app," and I ended up finding her on that. But I get it. She's just looking for a reason. What's the explanation of why this ended? We need some reason
And
to
it can't be
explain
me.
stuff.
It can't be me.
No, it's not you. Or you mean her? Yeah,
Yeah.
it's not her fault. Yeah. You have
Yeah.
to.
Yeah. Yeah. Not me. Literally. I'm not a home wrecker.
Not yet, buddy. Not yet.
What kind of girl do you think I am?
Now, you're pretty easy from what I understand. So
I totally am.
yeah. So I mean, that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Oh yeah.
But now,
So as far as lessons learned, real quick before we
Yeah,
move
yeah.
on. So lessons learned that you have, because you've had several relationships over just a little chunk of time. What are some lessons learned that you think you have from those relationships, good or bad?
Yeah, I definitely say one thing, at least for me, is I never, especially over the last 5 years or more, I didn't feel appreciated at all. Like I said, I'm doing all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I mean, because it's not just the working and then cooking and cleaning. I mean, because I did, and it's not like I cooked like box dinners. I'm cooking Indian food from Morocco, Italian, Mexican, all this stuff, right? And I would do that, clean up. I'm doing yard work. I'm doing stuff around the house. I'm doing the bills, the finances, everything, right? And never got any appreciation for it. I didn't get a Father's Day gift a lot of years until because I know she'd leave. She's like, I got to go out for a bit, and it's 4:00 in the afternoon on Father's Day. Same for birthdays. I bought several of my own birthday gifts, my own Christmas
Ouch.
gifts. A couple of years she did buy stuff for me, actually on her own, and I do remember those times. But most of the time, it was definitely not, and so I didn't feel appreciated. So to me, and that's the one thing that my girlfriend and I talk about all the time is she tells me, she's like, I just want you to know how much I appreciate you. And I tell her the same thing. And so to me, that's the
That's
big thing
good. That's great.
is having that appreciation. I think also
Yeah, appreciation.
not everybody's the same, but for me, definitely one of my love languages, if you will, because I read that book. I do recommend it to people because it's interesting when you think about how you treat your significant other. That's usually how you like to be treated. And so it's important for you to share that information with your significant other so they can do that for you. But
Interesting.
touch is definitely one of my love languages. And then service, acts of service. And acts of service is doing stuff, around the house. And I think that's a big one because my ex didn't do anything anymore. I think that's why those two, because I wasn't getting any intimacy and I wasn't getting any help around the house. So, but yeah, so that's, I think, probably my
Makes
biggest
sense.
advice, if you will, or lessons learned. Cool. Now,
Those are some good lessons learned.
we droned on and on about my relationship because mine's, I don't want to say fun, but there's definitely, because it started and ended. So yours hasn't ended. You've been married, I think, 21 years now.
Not yet.
Oh, man.
Something like that.
You've been together 24. Tell me. I don't remember.
No, you're right. We've been married for 21.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We've been together for like 23.
So how did yours start? What was, how did you meet each other? Which I actually know this, but we're sharing it to all these people. So how did you meet each other?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. It's your fault.
Yes.
It's all your fault. It's all her friend's fault. It's all your fault.
Yeah. I take
Yeah,
that.
so one night you guys were driving around town and these girls like pulled over next to you and one of the girls like stuck her head out and said, "Boys, you want to go have some fun?" And
Wasn't
then
quite like that,
eventually
but
you
yeah.
guys ended up I'm paraphrasing.
Yeah.
And eventually, you guys ended up visiting me at work. So
Yeah.
I worked at a restaurant at the time, and you guys had said so many amazing, great things about me to these girls, so they just had to come see me in person. So they drug you all the way over to my work, where I met up with you guys and the girls. And of course, she was one of them, and we kind of hit it off. You were like the very first person to actually points out the fact that she was all about this goodness, which I mean, come on, look at me,
Yeah. I
right? Look
agree.
at this. Look at this. Perfectly sculpted. And and yeah, after that we just kind of hit it off and we couldn't stay off each other, basically.
Yeah.
That's
Now,
how we met.
what's funny about that is, as far as talking you up, I think we actually did. But why I think that's funny is because thinking about it now, I would never talk you up. I would talk shit about you if, nowadays, like, oh, that guy, yeah, you don't want to talk to him. He's a jerk or whatever. But I think we
Yeah.
actually did talk you up. We actually, said good things about you.
Interesting.
Oh.
That's not the story that I hear. That's
Did
not
we
the
talk
story
shit
I
about
hear.
you? Did we talk shit about you?
I don't know.
Oh.
Apparently you did.
Oh, well, then that makes more sense. Okay, well, that's good because that sounds more like
Apparently
me.
you said that I had an affinity for
Large women.
celestial big creatures that swim throughout the sea.
No offense to any
Big, beautiful
bigger people
creatures.
because everybody's beautiful. But at that time, I think yes, because your previous girlfriend, because we were young and stupid and mean, because that's how young, stupid people are. So I apologize for my younger self. He was an asshole. But anyways, so yeah.
Yeah, he was an asshole. It's okay. I still like you.
Mm.
Anyway, so that's how we met, right?
Okay.
And the relationship over time has had ups and has downs and twists in between, but somehow we've been able to make it work.
Well, let's go back a second though.
So far.
So we talked about how I met my ex-in-laws. How did you meet your in-laws? Or future in-laws?
Yeah. So she took us over to her house. I don't know, it was probably within the week or maybe it was the following week or something.
Right.
I don't remember the timing exactly, but she wanted us to go over for whatever reason. I can't remember the reason why.
Yeah.
And but it wasn't for dinner. It wasn't for anything like that. I don't remember doing dinner with them. But it was you and me, right? And apparently her dad came out, pulled her aside, and said, "That is a man by my front door." And she's like, "Yeah, that's Titan and Venomous."
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Wait. I don't think you got the magnitude of what I'm saying. I'm used to you bringing boys home.
Right.
These are not boys. These are men. Why is there a man standing by the front door?"
Which, for the viewers and listeners, we were only, I think, 2 years older. I
Yeah.
think so. It's not like we were
Yeah.
10 or 15.
We're
We were
not
only
that
like
much older.
2.
No.
So we just both of us had facial hair.
But she looks like she's 15. She
'cause-
perpetually looks like she's 15 years old.
short.
She still looks like she's kind of 15. Yeah,
'cause
she's short. She's very fair skinned, and she looks very young. To this day, she gets carded, and she's well above carding age.
That's awesome.
She went out to lunch with our 21-year-old, and the guy said something along the lines of, "Oh, well, here, I hope you guys enjoyed your date, yada yada yada." It's like, whoa, this is my date. This is my son.
Crazy.
So
I can't
they
believe your
thought
son's
that
old.
I know. Oh, me too. So that's kind of, I don't know.
Funny.
What was your question? Your question?
Yeah,
I think I just had a squirrel moment.
Yeah, it's fine. No, so it was it was basically meeting her dad, and he said that you were men, and
meeting her dad. Yeah. But you know what? He's been very good to me, right?
Yeah.
So like, I never detected any of this weirdness or any
Sure.
of that conversation. He's always been very good to me, very supportive. I remember one time he like drove me to court because I got pulled over driving their vehicle up from Disney World, and he didn't have to, but he drove me down to court. Court was like 3 hours away from where we live, and he drove me up, and so he's always been very supportive and always been there whenever we needed something.
I won't say the place that you got pulled over, but I probably know it because they are notorious for speeding tickets through that area. And I used to drive through there all the time to go visit my ex when I was driving. So, and I know about 3 hours from you where that is. So, anyways, that's cool. So okay, so you met the parents. At what point did you decide, you know what, I want to spend the rest of my life with her?
Not long after that, to be honest. Like, so what I like about her is that she speaks her mind. She's not the traditional, like, I hate to use the term girly girl, but she's not. She's not
No.
a girly girl by any means.
She's very honest.
She can hold her own.
Right.
She's very honest and direct. She's also fun. She's less fun now, but back then she was so much fun. And
I'm gonna tell her you said she's
gotten kind of. She's less fun now. I tell her that to her face. She knows this. But yeah, she's fun. She's a fun person. We have a lot of the same likes.
Yeah.
Now that I'm thinking about it, stream of consciousness. Do we have the same likes because we've been together so long, or did we always have the same likes? Now I'm kind of questioning that. But regardless, the destination is same likes. So we've got a lot of the same likes. So we spend time watching movies together, watching TV together. We both read books. We don't necessarily read the same books, but she's very well read. I'm okay read. She's definitely out of the both of us. In my opinion, she's like the smartest one out of the both of us, but don't tell her I said that.
I would agree.
So she's got a lot of really, really great qualities, and she also has a really good heart. And I knew that like immediately, right off the cuff, that she had a super great heart. It's just that she's one of these people that's been hurt so much. She tends to be a little bit guarded about herself. But yeah, she's great. She's fantastic. But yeah, all those things kind of drew me to her, and
I'm
I
going to
knew that she
remind
was going to
you,
be the one.
back when you guys first started dating, something the two of you, talking about likes, the two of you would do that was a little bit creepy is the both of you would do your Cartman impressions and tell each other how you love each other as Cartman.
Yeah.
And
That was amazing.
Yeah.
Those are good old days.
So
Yeah.
that was always kind of funny. I remember that, just the two of you doing Cartman back and forth and talking about the
You
things you're going to
see?
do to each other.
That's how I knew. That's how I knew. Who wouldn't marry that?
Yeah. So you're going to hit 21 years. So for
Mhm.
your aspect, what are your lessons learned to keep a relationship going that long? What is the important factor in your relationship that says to you, yeah, I'm not going anywhere. This is where I want to be?
Patience.
Patience.
Patience, patience, patience. So she has been unbelievably patient with me. I've done some stupid shit. She's
Hmm.
been very patient with me and very good about it.
Yeah.
Now she's also done some dumb shit too,
Right.
right? So she's put us in situations where I'm like, really, you knucklehead, so we both have our thing. So patience is to me like super important. Another aspect is the ability to sit down and work through a problem and not
Right.
just ignore it and hope that it goes away.
Okay.
Now, she and I handle that a little bit differently
Hmm.
because she likes to tackle a problem like immediately. So if she and I have like an argument, like she wants it resolved right then and there.
Right.
Me, however, I'm different. I like to have a little bit of time to digest, think about it, right? Internalize before I sit down to come up with a solution. Just, I just feel like I get too worked up sometimes and I just need to back away from the situation, breathe a little bit, and then get back into problem solving mode.
It's funny because
So the ability to talk through things like that. Go ahead.
let's say it's funny because I'm like her, you're like my girlfriend,
Yeah.
because I want to
Yeah.
bring up, hey, I'm frustrated with this or whatever, and it's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
have to tell her that, and then she has to go away and think about it, or whatever. So for 30 minutes, an hour, maybe longer, I'm kind of sitting in limbo while I'm waiting to figure out how she feels about how I feel.
Right.
So it's that goes back to your patience, because I have to be like, okay, it's just how she works. Just let her go. If she's
Yep.
super upset about it,
Gotta
she's
let
going
it
to tell
happen.
you when she comes. If not, she may calm down about it, and everything will be fine. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
that's
But I
cool.
think those are kind of to me, those are the key qualities. And, we've been through a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
We've had financial hardship. She
Hmm.
had her own health issues. Um, every once in a while, we still kind of argue a little bit about money, although I make a good living.
Sure.
It's just, there's always these things that are going to come up. And for us, it's just been about, sitting down together and buckling down and kind of working through it. Because the one thing that we don't want to do is we don't want to break up.
Right.
We do love each other. And
Yeah.
when she's great, she's great. When I'm great, I'm great, right? Like we'll have our ups and downs.
You're
And
okay.
for us it's worth
Yeah.
working through things. Now someday I may change my mind, a week from now, a month from now, 2 years from now, whatever. She and I may have a complete change of heart,
Right.
and we may decide, what, this isn't worth the fight anymore,
Right.
and we'll decide to move on. But so far we've decided that it's worth the fight, and we just keep on, trying to do the very best to maintain a good relationship together.
I always kind of look at, when I look back at a relationship, like, because obviously I've inspected my past relationship quite a bit, dissected it quite a lot, and I'm kind of of the mindset that if most of the time you're fighting, there's a problem, right? If it's everybody's going to have some disagreements, and I say fighting, I honestly haven't had an actual fight with my ex. Like, I don't think I ever got into a screaming match about anything. Did with a previous ex, but not with my last wife. But yeah, it's like if you're constantly fighting, then there's a problem. If it's once in a while, that's human, and you're going to have
Yeah.
disagreements. So
Yeah, constant fighting, I agree with you. Constant fighting is not good, it's not healthy.
yeah,
I would say that's an indicator of a problem. I also think that the complete opposite is also a problem. If you're never fighting, you're never having any arguments. Either you
hmm,
are so incredibly like well matched together, good for you. Because I've heard of that. I've heard of people that say, I've never been apart from my significant other, and we never fight, and da 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 da.
right,
Good for you. That's to me, that's an exception. That's not the rule.
right,
Um, I think a little fight is good. It just to me, one of the things that me and my wife talk about is maintaining some amount of independence, like personality independence. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because I feel like some couples, they become that couple
They
and they
become one.
become an entity,
Right.
right? They become an entity. So they have to do everything together, go
Mm-hmm.
everywhere together. Their thoughts are the same, right? Like
Right.
you can kind of tell those couples that are like super, super attached. And that's sweet. That may work for a lot for some folks. For me, that doesn't really work. I still like to have my private time. I still like to do my own things. You
Sure.
know, I still like to have my own independent thought and personality
Right.
away from my wife. And it's not to say I don't love her. It's just I personality wise, that's the way that I like things. Um, you know, because ultimately, if you don't love yourself, if you're not okay with yourself, if you don't accept yourself, then who else is going to accept you?
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
agree.
anyway, so that's kind of the way that I view it, right? It's either you're going to be like super attached to each other, all up each other's butts, which by the way, we were
Mm-hmm.
initially in the beginning of our relationship,
Yeah. You guys disappeared.
to, you know, constantly fighting, and that's also not a good scenario to be in. We're fucking idiots. That's okay. All right. So that is it for today's episode. We'll be releasing these bi-weekly as video to YouTube and as an audio version on all podcast platforms. So please make sure you subscribe and check out the links in the description for more content. Titan, what's the topic for the next episode?
So, on our next episode, we're going to talk about our experiences as moving around a lot as kids, because both you and I did move a lot as kids. And I think that there's a lot of other people that could relate to that and could see how it has impacted even how they've lived their lives.
All right. Bye for now.
Bye.
Thanks for hanging.